They called her a charity case. They whispered that she was lucky just to breathe the same air as her husband, the banking tycoon, Sterling Thorne. On the night of his 30th birthday, gala in front of 500 of the city's elite, Sterling didn't just ask for a divorce, he physically threw his pregnant wife out the front door like garbage. The crowd laughed. The mistress smirked. But the laughter died instantly when the ground began to shake. Because the old man, stepping out of the lead limousine, wasn't just a visitor. He was the man who owned the bank holding Sterling's debt, and he was there to pick up his granddaughter. The calendar on the wall of the penthouse kitchen read October the 14th. To the rest of New York City, it was just a Tuesday. To the business world, it was the highly anticipated 30th birthday gala of Sterling Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Logistics, a man featured on the 30 under 30 list 3 years running. But to Cyrus, it was the day her marriage finally died. She just didn't know it yet. Cyrus Vance, or Cyrus Thorne, as she was legally known, was on her hands and knees scrubbing a coffee stain out of the white Italian marble foyer. She wasn't the maid. The Thorne household had a staff of 5. But Sterling had fired the morning cleaner yesterday for breathing too loudly, and he had insisted that Cyrus clean the mess herself. "It builds character, Cyrus," he had said, stepping over her legs to check his watch. "Besides, it's not like you contribute financially to this house. You might as well make yourself useful." Cyrus brushed a stray lock of brown hair from her forehead. Her hands were red and raw. When she had met Sterling 4 years ago, she was a quiet art student, volunteering at a shelter. He had been charming then, seemingly in love with her simplicity. She had hidden her background from him, wanting to be loved for who she was, not for the colossal empire her grandfather, Silas Vance, had built in Europe. She had passed the test of poverty. She had married Sterling without a penny to her name, cutting off her allowance from the Vance estate to prove her independence. But the moment the ring was on her finger, the charm evaporated. Sterling didn't want a partner. He wanted a punching bag. "Cyrus!" Sterling's voice boomed from the top of the spiraling staircase. He was adjusting the cuffs of a bespoke Armani tuxedo. He looked like a Greek god, tall, sharp-jawed, with eyes the color of ice, and just as cold. Cyrus stood up quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm here, Sterling. Is the stain gone?" He descended the stairs, not even glancing at the floor. He stopped in front of her, his nose wrinkling as if he smelled something rotten. "Go shower. You smell like bleach and desperation," he sneered. "And for God's sake, wear the beige dress. The one with the high neck." The beige one," Cyrus stammered. "But Sterling, it's your 30th birthday. I bought a red gown. It's beautiful. I saved up from my Etsy shop sales to—" "No." He cut her off sharp. "Jessica is wearing red. I don't want you clashing with the guests." Cyrus felt the blood drain from her face. Jessica. Jessica Malt was the CFO of Thorne Logistics. She was blonde, vivacious, and constantly at Sterling's side. For the past 6 months, she had been more of a wife to him than Cyrus was allowed to be. "Why does it matter what Jessica wears?" Cyrus asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm your wife." Sterling laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He leaned in close, grabbing her chin with his thumb and forefinger, squeezing just hard enough to hurt. "You are my wife on paper, Cyrus. You are a placeholder, a charity case I picked up because I thought you were sweet. But you're just boring. Tonight is about my success, my company. I need you to fade into the wallpaper. Do not speak unless spoken to." Do not eat. And do not embarrass me." He shoved her face away and walked toward the elevator. "Be ready in 20 minutes. If you're late, I leave you behind." Cyrus stood alone in the massive, cold foyer. She touched her stomach. She hadn't told him yet. She was 8 weeks pregnant. She had planned to gift him the ultrasound picture tonight, praying that a baby would melt the ice in his heart. She looked at the beige dress hanging in the closet. It was shapeless, ugly, a sack designed to make her look like a servant. Just one more night, she told herself, fighting back tears. "I'll tell him about the baby tonight. Everything will change." She was wrong. Everything would change, but not in the way she expected. The venue was the Sapphire Room at the St. Regis Hotel. It was an ocean of velvet ropes, flashing cameras and champagne towers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. When the Blacktown car pulled up, the paparazzi swarmed. Sterling stepped out first, buttoning his jacket, flashing that $1,000,000 smile that had charmed investors across the globe. He waved, soaking in the adulation. Cyrus stepped out a moment later. The cameras didn't flash. In her shapeless beige dress with minimal makeup, and her hair pulled back in a severe bun, as Sterling had demanded, she looked like his personal assistant, or perhaps a governess. Sterling didn't offer her his arm. He walked 3 steps ahead of her, entering the ballroom as if he were a king returning from conquest. Inside the room was buzzing. The who's who of the business world was there. There was Marcus Thorne Sterling's cousin and bitter rival. There were investors from the Obsidian Group. And there, standing in the center of the room, holding a flute of vintage Dom Perignon, was Jessica Mould. She was stunning. She wore a crimson silk gown that clung to every curve with a slit that went up to her hip. Her diamonds sparkled under the chandelier light. She looked like the queen of the evening. Sterling made a beeline for her. Cyrus trailed behind, feeling small and invisible. "Sterling, happy birthday, darling," Jessica squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. She kissed him on the cheek, too close to his mouth to be friendly. "You look breathtaking, Jess," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, a tone of affection he hadn't used with Cyrus in years. Cyrus stood awkwardly to the side. Jessica pulled back and pretended to notice her for the first time. Her eyes scanned Cyrus's beige dress with predatory amusement. "Oh, Cyrus, you came," Jessica said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "And you're wearing that. How brave. It's so rustic, very prairie chic." A few guests nearby chuckled. Sterling didn't defend her. He joined in the laughter. "She has simple tastes," Sterling said, sipping a scotch. "Not everyone has your elegance, Jessica." Cyrus clutched her small clutch bag tighter. Inside was the ultrasound photo. Be strong, she thought. "Happy birthday, Sterling," Cyrus said softly, reaching for his arm. He flinched away from her touch as if she had burned him. "Don't paw at me, Cyrus. Go find a corner. Get a mineral water. Don't talk to the investors. You'll bore them to death with talk of your little knitting hobbies." Cyrus bit her lip, tasting blood. She turned to walk away, trying to find a quiet spot near the balcony. "Wait," Jessica called out. "Sterling, we need a toast. Everyone, a toast." The room went silent. Jessica raised her glass. "To Sterling Thorne," she announced, her voice projecting across the hall. "The man who built an empire from nothing. The most eligible bachelor. Oh, wait, I forgot he was married for a second." Laughter rippled through the crowd again. To Sterling, Jessica continued, her eyes locking onto Cyrus's, who deserves a woman who can stand beside him, not behind him. She took a step toward Cyrus, feigning a stumble. The glass of red wine in her hand tipped forward. It wasn't an accident. Cyrus saw the malicious glint in Jessica's eyes a split second before it happened. Splash. The dark red liquid hit Cyrus's beige dress chest high. It soaked instantly into the cheap fabric, spreading like a gunshot wound. It dripped down onto the white marble floor of the ballroom. The room gasped. "Oh my God!" Jessica cried, covering her mouth with a hand that wore a diamond bracelet worth more than Cyrus's supposed life savings. "I am so clumsy, Cyrus. I am so sorry. But why didn't you move? You're always so slow." Cyrus stood frozen. The wine was cold against her skin. She looked at Sterling, desperate for help. Desperate for him to say, "It's okay. It was an accident." Sterling stared at her. His face turned a deep shade of purple. Not out of anger at Jessica. Out of anger at Cyrus. He grabbed Cyrus's arm, his grip bruising. "You clumsy idiot!" he hissed loud enough for the inner circle to hear. "You just ruined the vintage flooring. Look at you. You look like a bleeding pig." "Sterling, she threw it on me," Cyrus started. "Shut up," he roared. The music stopped. The entire room turned to look. "Always the victim. I invite you to one nice event, and you make it about yourself. You ruin everything you touch." "I didn't do anything," Cyrus whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Sterling, please. I have something to tell you." I don't care what you are," Sterling interrupted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He looked around the room, seeing the judgment in the eyes of his peers. He felt his reputation cracking. He needed to assert dominance. He needed to cut the dead weight. He looked at Jessica, who gave him a subtle nod. It was a pre-planned signal. Sterling turned back to Cyrus, his eyes dead. "I'm glad this happened," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Because it makes this easier. I didn't want to do this until after the fiscal quarter ended, but I can't look at you for another second." He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a folded document. He slapped it against Cyrus's wine-stained chest. "What is this?" she asked, her hands shaking. "Divorce papers," Sterling announced. "I'm done, Cyrus. I'm filing for divorce. And since you signed the prenuptial agreement, you leave with exactly what you came with. Nothing." The silence in the room was deafening. "Sterling, you can't be serious," Cyrus cried. I'm pregnant." She said it. The words hung in the air. For a second, Sterling paused. A flicker of emotion crossed his face. Shock, fear. Then Jessica laughed, a high, cruel sound. "Pregnant? Oh, please, you've been trying to trap him for years. It's probably a lie. Or worse, it's not his." The accusation snapped whatever hesitation Sterling had. "Get out," Sterling said. "But it's your child," Cyrus sobbed. "I said, get out," Sterling screamed. He grabbed her by the shoulders, spinning her around toward the grand double doors. He didn't just ask her to leave. He marched her across the ballroom floor. Guests parted like the Red Sea, watching in a mix of horror and amusement. Sterling Thorne was physically ejecting his wife from his birthday party. When they reached the heavy oak doors, Sterling didn't open them gently. He shoved her. Cyrus stumbled her heels, slipping on the polished floor, and she fell hard onto the concrete of the valet drop-off area outside. It had started to rain. "Sterling!" she screamed, looking back up at him. He stood in the doorway, framed by the golden light of the party, looking like a demon. Jessica appeared beside him, slipping her arm through his. "Don't come back to the penthouse," Sterling spat. "I'll have your boxes sent to the shelter where I found you. You're trash, Cyrus. Go back to the gutter." He slammed the massive doors shut. The sound echoed like a final gunshot. Cyrus sat on the wet pavement, the rain mixing with the red wine on her dress, turning it into a grotesque watercolor. The valets looked away, too embarrassed to help her. She was alone. No money. No home. Pregnant. And humiliated in front of the entire city. She curled into a ball, sobbing into the cold concrete. She reached for the cheap burner phone she kept in her purse, the only phone Sterling allowed her to have. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 4 years. It rang once. Twice. "Hello." A deep, gravelly voice answered. It was a voice that commanded armies. A voice that made prime ministers nervous. "Grandfather." Cyrus whispered, her voice breaking. There was a pause on the other end. Then the tone shifted from formal to terrified. "Cyrus, is that you? My godchild, where are you? We've been looking for you since the day you ran away." I was wrong, Grandfather," she choked out. "You were right about him. You were right about everything. He threw me out." "He did what?" The voice on the other end dropped to a whisper, but it was the kind of whisper that promised violence. "Who threw you out?" "Cyrus." "Sterling Thorne." Silence. Then the sound of movement. Papers shifting. A chair being pushed back. "Stay where you are, Cyrus," Silas Vance said. "Do not move. I am in New York for the UN summit. I am 10 minutes away." "Grandfather, I look like a mess. I don't care how you look. You are a Vance. And today Sterling Thorne learns what happens when you touch a Vance." The line went dead. Cyrus lowered the phone. She wiped her eyes. Inside the hall, she could hear the muffled sound of music starting again. They were celebrating. They thought she was gone. She looked down the long, dark driveway of the hotel. At the far end, headlights appeared. Not one pair. 2. Then 4. Then 6. 6 massive vehicles were touring down the road, ignoring the speed limit, moving in a tactical formation. The drama wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rain was coming down harder now, a freezing October downpour that washed the city grit into the gutters. Cyrus shivered uncontrollably, the cold seeping into her bones. But the sound of the approaching engines made the ground beneath her vibrate. It wasn't just a car. It was a cavalcade. 6 matte black Rolls-Royce Phantoms, their grills gleaming like the teeth of iron beasts, screeched to a halt in front of the St. Regis. They blocked the entire valet lane, trapping the luxury sports cars of Sterling's guests behind them. The valet captain, a young man who had sneered at Cyrus just moments ago, ran forward, waving his arms. "Hey, you can't park here. This is a private event for Mr. Thorne." The lead car's door flew open. A man stepped out. Not an old man, but a mountain of a bodyguard, standing 6'7", wearing an earpiece and a suit that cost more than the valet's annual salary. He didn't even look at the valet. He simply extended a massive hand and pushed the boy aside as if he were a curtain. "Secure the perimeter," the bodyguard spoke into his wrist microphone. Instantly, 12 men poured out of the other vehicles. They moved with military precision, forming a protective ring around the third car in the convoy. They held large black umbrellas, creating a dry canopy leading from the car door, to where Cyrus was sitting on the wet pavement. The back door of the central phantom opened. A cane topped with a silver handle shaped like a lion's head hit the asphalt first. Then a polished black leather shoe. Silas Vance emerged. At 82 years old, Silas Vance was a myth in the global economy. He was the majority shareholder of the Vance Banking Group, a conglomerate that quietly owned pieces of almost every major industry in Europe and North America. He was known as the Iron Duke. He didn't just move markets, he owned them. He stood tall, his posture unyielding despite his age. He wore a charcoal wool coat over a three-piece suit that whispered of old-world power. His white hair was swept back, and his eyes the same shade of blue as Cyrus's burned with a terrifying intelligence. He scanned the scene. He saw the panicked valets, he saw the grand entrance of the hotel, and then he looked down. He saw his granddaughter, the heiress to a $40 billion fortune, the girl he had raised after her parents died in a plane crash. She was huddled on the dirty ground, soaked, shivering, covered in red wine stains that looked too much like blood. Silas's face didn't crumple in sadness. It hardened into granite. He walked over to her, his cane clicking rhythmically on the pavement. The bodyguards moved with him, keeping the rain off his shoulders. "Grandfather," Cyrus wept, trying to stand up, but failing as her legs gave out. Silas dropped his cane. He didn't care about it. He fell to his knees on the wet concrete, ruining his bespoke trousers, and pulled Cyrus into his chest. "I've got at you, little bird," he whispered, his voice cracking just slightly. "I've got to you." "I'm sorry," Cyrus sobbed into his coat, the smell of his expensive tobacco and sandalwood cologne bringing back memories of her childhood. "I tried to do it on my own. I wanted to prove I could be normal. But he... Hush," Silas commanded gently. He pulled back and looked at her face. He saw the redness in her eyes, the humiliation etched into her expression. He touched the wine stain on her dress. "Is this blood?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "No." Cyrus sniffled. "It's wine. His mistress, she threw it on me." And he laughed. "He threw me out, grandfather. He threw me out because I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. Silas Vance froze. "Pregnant," he repeated. "You are carrying my great-grandchild." Cyrus nodded. Silas looked up at the hotel entrance. The golden light spilled out the sound of laughter and jazz drifting into the cold night air. Inside that building, a man was celebrating the destruction of his granddaughter, while his unborn heir was left in the rain. Silas Vance slowly stood up. He extended a hand and helped Cyrus to her feet. He took off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, engulfing her small frame. "Henry," Silas barked at the head of his security detail. "Sir," the giant man replied instantly. "Get the car ready to take Cyrus to the Ritz. Get Dr. Harris on the line. Have him meet us there to check the baby." "No," Cyrus said suddenly. Her voice was weak, but there was a new steel in it. Silas looked down at her. "Cyrus, you are cold. You need rest." "I don't want to run away," Cyrus said, wiping the rain from her face. She looked at the hotel doors. "For 4 years, I let him make me feel small. I let him hide me. If I leave now, I'm just the trash he threw out." She looked at her grandfather. "You told me once that Vances don't retreat. We conquer." A slow, terrifying smile spread across Silas Vance's face. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "That's my girl," he said. He turned to Henry. "Cancel the car to the Ritz. We are going inside." Sir. Henry hesitated, glancing at the security at the door. We aren't on the guest list. The private security inside is heavy. Silas adjusted his cufflinks. By the hotel. Henry blinked. Sir, you heard me. Call the holding group. By the St. Regis, right now. I want to own the building before I walk through those doors. It will take 10 minutes to clear the wire transfer, sir. Good, Silas said, offering his arm to Cyrus. That gives us time to make an entrance. Inside the sapphire room, the party was reaching a fever pitch. Sterling Thorne was standing on a raised platform, a microphone in hand. He looked triumphant. The problem of his wife had been removed. The investors were happy. Jessica was hanging on his arm, looking every bit the trophy he felt he deserved. Thank you all. Sterling beamed, raising a glass. Tonight isn't just about turning 30. It's about shedding the old weight and moving into the future. Thorne Logistics is posting record profits. Our stock is up 12%. And I promise you the next quarter will be even better. Hear, hear, the crowd shouted. I have made some personal changes tonight. Sterling continued, glancing at the door with a smirk. To ensure that nothing holds this company back. No distractions, no mediocrity. Jessica giggled, whispering loud enough for the front row to hear. No charity cases, the room chuckled. They were sharks, all of them. They respected ruthlessness. So let's drink, Sterling shouted. To the future. Boom! The double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They were kicked open. The sound was like a thunderclap. The jazz band stopped playing instantly. A waiter dropped a tray of champagne flutes, the glass shattering in the sudden silence. Heads turned. 500 of New York's elite looked toward the entrance. First came the security team. 6 men in black suits moved in a V formation, pushing aside the hotel's private security like they were children. They cleared a path through the center of the room, their expressions stone cold. Then the pair walked in. Silas Vance walked with the slow, deliberate stride of a man who owned the earth beneath his feet. Beside him was Cyrus. She was still wearing the wine-stained beige dress, her hair wet and matted, but she was draped in a coat that cost more than Sterling's car, and she was walking with her head high. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It started as a whisper and grew into a roar of disbelief. Is that... Oh my God! That's Silas Vance. The Silas Vance, the chairman of Vance Global. What is he doing here? Who is he with? Is that the wife? Sterling stood on the stage, the microphone hanging loosely in his hand. He squinted against the stage lights. He recognized Silas Vance, of course. Everyone in business did. Silas was a deity. Sterling had tried to get a meeting with Vance Global for 3 years and had been rejected every single time. But why was he here? And why was he holding Cyrus's arm? Confusion turned to panic in Sterling's chest. He jumped down from the stage, smoothing his tuxedo jacket, putting on his best sycophantic smile. "Mr. Vance," Sterling called out. His voice cracking slightly. He rushed toward the center of the room, cutting off their path. This is an incredible honor. I had no idea you were in New York. If I had known, I would have sent a personal invitation." Silas didn't stop walking. He didn't even look at Sterling. He walked right past him as if Sterling were a waiter offering a stale hors d'oeuvre. Sterling froze, humiliated. He turned around, chasing after them. "Mr. Vance, sir. I'm Sterling Thorne. This is my party." Silas finally stopped. They were in the center of the room under the massive crystal chandelier. Silas turned slowly. He looked at Sterling with eyes that were absolute zero. "I know who you are, boy," Silas said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the silent ballroom it carried to every corner. "You are the man who just threw my granddaughter out into the rain." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush lungs. Sterling blinked his brain, trying to process the information. "Your granddaughter." He looked at Cyrus, the quiet, mousy girl he had married. The girl with no family, no money, who shopped at thrift stores. Cyrus. Sterling laughed nervously. "No, sir, there must be a mistake. Cyrus is... She's nobody. She's an orphan. She told me herself. I told you I had no family who cared about me." Cyrus spoke up, her voice steady. "Because when I met you, I was estranged from them. I wanted to see if a man could love me. For me, not for the name Vance." She stepped forward, shedding the heavy coat. The wine stain was visible to everyone. "I found my answer tonight, Sterling." The crowd gasped. The pieces were clicking together. The charity case was actually the heiress to one of the largest fortunes in the world. Jessica Malt, who had been standing near the stage, went pale. She tried to slink backward into the crowd, but Silas's eyes snapped to her. "And you," Silas said, pointing a gloved finger at her. "The one in the red dress. The one who likes to spill wine." Jessica froze. It was an accident." "You," Silas said, turning back to Sterling, "have made a grave error in calculation, Mr. Thorne. You assumed my granddaughter was weak because she was kind. You mistook her silence for submission." Sterling was sweating now. He could feel the eyes of his investors boring into his back. This was a PR disaster. He had to fix it. "Mr. Vance, please," Sterling said, holding up his hands. "This is a domestic misunderstanding. Cyrus and we have been having issues. She's emotional. She's pregnant, you know, hormones." "I know she is pregnant," Silas roared, his voice suddenly booming like a cannon. "That is why I am going to destroy you." Sterling took a step back. "Now wait a minute. You can't threaten me. I'm the CEO of Thorne Logistics. We are a publicly traded company. You have no power here." Silas laughed. It was a terrifying, dry sound. "Power?" Silas asked. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen once and put it on speaker, holding it up. "Execute," Silas said to the phone. "Done, sir," a voice on the line replied. Silas looked at Sterling. "Do you know who finances your debt, Mr. Thorne? You took out a $200 million loan 3 years ago to expand your fleet. You leveraged your entire company and your personal assets against that loan. That loan is with distinct banks," Sterling argued. "It's with the Obsidian Group." "The Obsidian Group," Silas said calmly, "is a shell company, wholly owned by Vance Banking. I own your debt, Sterling." Sterling's knees began to shake. "So I make my payments. You can't call a loan that is in good standing." "Actually," Silas smiled, "Clause 14B of your contract. The character clause. If the CEO engages in public conduct that damages the reputation of the associated lender, the lender reserves the right to demand immediate repayment of the full principal." Silas gestured around the room. "Throwing your pregnant wife, my granddaughter, onto the street in front of 500 witnesses, I'd say that damages my reputation." Sterling felt the blood leave his head. You're calling the loan. I am demanding full repayment, $200 million, by midnight tonight." "I don't have $200 million in cash," Sterling screamed. "No one does." "Then I begin asset seizure," Silas said casually. starting with this company, then your penthouse, then your cars, and Silas looked at the expensive watch on Sterling's wrist. I'll take the watch too. Sterling looked around the room, desperate for an ally. Marcus, do something, he yelled at his cousin. Marcus Thorne, his rival and cousin, stepped forward. He held up a glass of champagne. Actually, Sterling, Marcus smiled, looking at Cyrus. I think Mr. Vance is being very reasonable. You did behave like an animal. Sterling was alone. Silas turned to Cyrus. Are you ready to go, my dear? I think the air in here stinks of cheap cologne and bad decisions. Cyrus looked at Sterling one last time. He was trembling, broken, stripped of his arrogance, in less than 5 minutes. I'm ready, grandfather, she said. She turned to leave, but stopped. She walked over to the table where the birthday cake sat, a massive 6-tier monstrosity. She picked up a glass of red wine from a waiter's tray. She walked over to Jessica. Jessica flinched. Don't. Cyrus didn't throw it. She simply tilted the glass and poured it slowly over Jessica's expensive Jimmy Choo shoes. Oops, Cyrus whispered. I'm so clumsy. She turned and took her grandfather's arm. Let's go home. As they walked out, the silence held. No one moved until the doors closed behind them. Then the chaos began. The doors of the St. Regis had barely clicked shut behind Silas and Cyrus before the atmosphere in the Sapphire Room shifted from shock to predation. Sterling Thorne stood alone in the center of the dance floor. The music had not restarted. The guests, people he called friends, mentors and partners, were looking at him not with sympathy, but with the cold calculation of vultures spotting a carcass. His phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it began a continuous, angry vibration in his pocket. He pulled it out. Notification, Obsidian Group, credit line suspended. Notification, Amex Centurion, account frozen due to suspicious activity. Notification, Vance Global Legal Depet. Notice of asset seizure. It's a bluff, Sterling muttered to himself, his hands shaking so hard he almost dropped the device. He can't do this in 5 minutes. It's impossible. He looked around for Jessica. He needed her. She was the CFO. She would know how to move funds, how to hide the liquid assets before Vance's lawyers could lock them down. Jess! Sterling called out, spotting her near the exit. She was walking fast, her red coat thrown hastily over her wine-stained dress. He ran to catch up with her, grabbing her elbow just as she reached the valet stand. Jess, wait. We need to go to the office immediately. We need to shred the files on the offshore accounts and transfer the liquidity to the Cayman shell before morning. If Vance is serious, we're in for a fight. Jessica stopped. She turned slowly. The adoration that had been in her eyes only an hour ago was gone, replaced by a look of sheer disgust. We, she asked, arching a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. There is no we, Sterling. What are you talking about? We're partners. We were partners when you were the golden boy of New York. Jessica cut him off, her voice ice cold. I bet on a winner. I don't bet on men who get publicly castrated by their wives' grandfathers. Do you know who Silas Vance is? He eats countries for breakfast. You're finished, Sterling. You can't leave me, Sterling hissed, his voice rising in panic. We're in this together. You helped me cook the books for the Q3 report. If I go down, you go down. Jessica laughed, checking her phone as an Uber arrived, not a limousine, but a standard sedan. She was already cutting costs. I didn't sign those reports, darling. You did. I was just an advisor. And as of 5 minutes ago, I've resigned. I sent the email from the bathroom. She opened the car door. Good luck with the debt, Sterling. And for the record, that beige dress Cyrus wore, it actually looked better on her than this mess looks on me. She slammed the door. Sterling watched the tail lights fade into the rainy night. He was alone. He tried to signal the valet for his Ferrari. The valet captain, the same one who had been shoved by Silas's bodyguard, crossed his arms and smirked. "Sorry, Mr. Thorne," the captain said. "We just got a call from the leasing company. They've enacted a repossession order. The tow truck is already on its way for the Ferrari." I have to walk," Sterling whispered, the reality crashing down on him. "You can try the subway." The valet shrugged. "It's only $2.75, unless your card gets declined there too." Meanwhile, across the city, the atmosphere was a world apart. The motorcade of phantoms pulled into the underground garage of the Vance estate, a historic limestone mansion on the Upper East Side that took up half a city block. It was a fortress of wealth and privacy. Cyrus was ushered out of the car. She was exhausted, her adrenaline crashing, leaving her trembling. But she wasn't cold anymore. The heated seats of the Rolls-Royce and her grandfather's coat had warmed her. "Dr. Araris is in the library," Silas said gently, guiding her toward the private elevator. "We check the baby first. Then you eat. Then you sleep for a week." "Grandfather," Cyrus said softly as the elevator rose. "I didn't mean to cause a scene. I wanted to give him the ultrasound. I thought maybe—" "Cyrus, look at me." Silas turned her to face the polished brass doors. "You didn't cause the scene. You survived it. You have the Vance blood. We don't apologize for surviving." The library was warm, smelling of old paper and burning birchwood from the fireplace. Dr. Aris, the personal physician to the Vance family for 30 years, was waiting with a portable ultrasound machine. "Lie down, my dear," Dr. Aris said kindly. Cyrus lay on the velvet chaise lounge. She pulled up the ruined dress. The gel was cold on her stomach. Silas stood by the window looking out at the rain, his back turned to give her privacy, but his ears straining for the sound. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The heartbeat filled the room. Fast, strong. "There it is." Dr. Aris smiled. "Strong heartbeat. About 8 weeks, just as you said. Stress is high, so we need to be careful. But the fetus is resilient." Dr. Aris moved the wand slightly. The sound changed. It became a dual rhythm, a galloping cacophony. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Dr. Aris paused. He adjusted his glasses. A wide smile broke across his face. "Well now," the doctor chuckled. "It seems Sterling Thorne made a bigger mistake than he realized." "What is it?" Cyrus asked, panic rising. "Is something wrong?" "Quite the opposite." Dr. Aris turned the screen toward her. "Silas, you might want to see this." Silas walked over. He looked at the grainy, black and white image. 2 sacs. Dr. Aris pointed. "Twins." Cyrus gasped, covering her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but these were different. They were tears of overwhelming relief and terror. "Twins," Silas whispered. The Iron Duke, the man who made nations tremble, reached out a shaking hand and touched the screen. "Double the trouble." He looked at Cyrus. "We will need a bigger nursery." "He doesn't know," Cyrus whispered. "Sterling doesn't know it's twins." "And he never will," Silas vowed, his voice dropping to a growl. "He gave up his rights when he threw you into the gutter. These children are Vances. They will carry your name, and they will never ever set foot in a house owned by a Thorne." 3 months later. New York City in January was unforgiving. The wind whipped off the Hudson River like a razor blade. Sterling Thorne pulled the collar of his coat up. It was a cheap polyester blend he had bought at a discount store. His Armani suits had been sold to pay for legal retainers that hadn't saved him. He stood on the sidewalk across the street from the Vance estate. He had been standing there for 3 hours. His fall had been absolute. Within 48 hours of the gala, the board of Thorne Logistics had voted to remove him as CEO. Marcus Thorne, his cousin, had taken the seat, and his first act was to publicly denounce Sterling to save the stock price. The character clause Silas invoked had triggered a domino effect. The banks seized the penthouse. The cars were gone. His friends blocked his number. Even his gym membership was revoked. He was currently sleeping on a friend's couch in Queens, a friend who was rapidly losing patience with Sterling's depression and drinking. But Sterling wasn't just depressed. He was obsessed. He watched the iron gates of the mansion. He knew she was in there. He had seen the tabloids. The secret Vance heiress from cinders to queen. Pictures of Cyrus attending gallery openings with her grandfather, looking radiant, healthy, and visibly pregnant. Every time he saw a photo of her baby bump, a twisted mix of regret and greed churned in his gut. That baby was his ticket back. Legally, he was still her husband. The divorce dragged on because Silas's lawyers buried Sterling in paperwork he couldn't afford to fight. But the child, parental rights were harder to terminate. If he could just get to her, just talk to her, he could manipulate her. She had always been soft. She had loved him once. He could convince her that he had changed, that the stress made him snap. The heavy iron gates swung open. A black SUV pulled out. It wasn't the convoy this time, just a single car. Sterling's eyes narrowed. He saw her silhouette in the back seat. She was alone. He ran. He dashed across the street, dodging a taxi that honked aggressively. He threw himself in front of the SUV as it slowed to turn onto Fifth Avenue. "Cyrus! Cyrus!" he screamed, slamming his hands on the hood. The SUV screeched to a halt. The driver's door opened instantly, a bodyguard stepping out with a hand reaching for a weapon inside his jacket. "Wait!" Cyrus's voice came from the back. "Don't hurt him." The back window rolled down. Sterling rushed to the window breathless, his face gaunt and unshaven. He looked at Cyrus. She looked like a goddess. Her skin was glowing, her hair thick and shiny. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater and a diamond necklace that spelled out Vance. "Cyrus!" Sterling panted, grabbing the window frame. "Oh God, Cyrus, look at you. You're beautiful." Cyrus looked at him. She didn't recoil. She didn't cry. She looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a bug. "You look terrible, Sterling," she said calmly. "I've been going crazy," he lied, putting on his best puppy dog eyes. "I lost everything, Cyrus, but I don't care about the money. I realized I lost you. That's what killed me. I was stressed, I was drunk that night. I didn't mean it." He reached his hand through the window, trying to touch her cheek. Cyrus leaned back out of reach. "You didn't mean it?" she asked dryly. "You didn't mean to call me trash? You didn't mean to throw me on the concrete, or did you just not mean to do it to a billionaire heiress?" "No, it's not about the money," Sterling pleaded. He looked at her stomach. It was large now, round and heavy. "It's about our family. That's my baby, Cyrus. A father has a right to see his child. You can't keep my son away from me." Cyrus placed a protective hand over her belly. "First of all, Sterling," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "It's not a son, and it's not a baby." Sterling blinked. "What? It's twins," she revealed. "A boy and a girl." Sterling's eyes widened. Two heirs, two connections to the Vance fortune. His greed flared in his eyes. He couldn't hide it fast enough. Cyrus saw it. "Twins," he breathed. "Cyrus, please, let me come home. We can raise them together. I can help run the family business. Your grandfather needs someone young, someone with vision." Cyrus laughed. It was a genuine, hearty laugh. "You think you're going to run Vance Global?" She shook her head. "Sterling, you couldn't even run a logistics company without cooking the books." She pressed a button on the door. The window began to roll up. "Cyrus!" "No, listen to me." Sterling panicked, jamming his fingers in the gap. "If you leave, I'll sue. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you kidnapped my children. I have rights." Cyrus signaled the driver to wait. She lowered the window one last time. She leaned forward, her face inches from his. "You have no rights," she whispered. "Because you aren't their father." Sterling froze. "What? Of course I am. You were faithful. You were obsessed with me." "I was faithful," Cyrus nodded. "But grandfather's lawyers found something interesting in your medical files from your college days. The mumps infection you had junior year. It left you sterile." "Sterling." Sterling's mouth fell open. That's a lie." "Is it?" Cyrus smirked. "Or maybe that's why we tried for 3 years and nothing happened. Maybe that's why you blamed me for being barren." "But," Sterling pointed at her stomach, "then, whose are those?" "I used a donor," Cyrus lied effortlessly. It was a bluff, a magnificent, cruel bluff that Silas had scripted for her. Sterling wasn't actually sterile, and the babies were his biologically. But Cyrus knew Sterling. He was a narcissist. He would believe his own body had failed him before he believed Cyrus had cheated. And if he believed he wasn't the father, he wouldn't fight for DNA tests. He would walk away to save his ego. "A donor," Sterling whispered, horrified. "I wanted a baby." Cyrus shrugged. "And I knew you hated the idea. So I took matters into my own hands last year. They aren't yours, Sterling. You have no claim on the Vance fortune. You are just a sterile, bankrupt ex-husband." The lie destroyed him. It struck the very core of his vanity. He pulled his hands away from the car, as if it were radioactive. You whore," he stammered, but there was no fire in it. He was defeated. "Goodbye, Sterling," Cyrus said. The window rolled up, sealing her inside the warmth. The SUV accelerated, leaving Sterling standing in the slush, staring at his empty hands, believing that he was truly genetically a dead end. Inside the car, Cyrus let out a long breath. "That was ruthless," she whispered to herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from Silas. "Did you tell him?" Cyrus typed back. "I told him. He believes it. He won't sue for custody." Silas replied, "Good. Now come meet me at the office. We just bought Thorn Logistics. I want you to fire your cousin Marcus personally." Cyrus smiled. The game wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about domination. The headline of Forbes magazine read, "The New Era of Vance, How Cyrus Vance Thorn Tripled a Legacy." Cyrus sat on a park bench in Central Park, watching the autumn leaves fall. She wasn't wearing the shapeless beige dress anymore. She wore a tailored camel trench coat, knee-high leather boots, and a scarf that cost more than her old apartment. But she wasn't looking at the magazine. She was watching two 4-year-olds chasing a golden retriever through the leaves. "Leo Luna, stay where I can see you." She called out, her voice filled with laughter. Leo, a boy with messy dark hair and piercing ice-blue eyes, tripped over his own feet, giggled and scrambled back up. Luna, his twin sister, was faster, grabbing the dog's frisbee with a squeal of triumph. "They have energy," a voice rasped beside her. Cyrus turned. Silas Vance sat there. He was 87 now, moving a bit slower, but his mind was still as sharp as a diamond cutter. "They have the Vance stubbornness," Cyrus corrected him, smiling. "And the thorn charm," Silas muttered, though not unkindly. "Unfortunately." Cyrus's smile faded slightly. "They ask about their father sometimes. I tell them he went away on a long trip." "Better than the truth," Silas said, tapping his cane. "That he was a fool who traded diamonds for stones." A few yards away, a sanitation worker in a neon orange vest was spearing trash with a stick. He moved slowly, his back hunched, his face weathered by years of hard labor and bitter nights. He stopped when he heard the names. Leo. Luna. The worker looked up. Under the grime and the grey stubble, the eyes were unmistakable. It was Sterling. He hadn't run a company in 5 years. After the bankruptcy, he had spiraled. Alcohol, gambling, bad investments with the few dollars he had left. He had become the very thing he used to mock invisible. He stared at the woman on the bench. Cyrus. She looked more beautiful than the day he married her. And the old man, Silas. But then his eyes locked on the children. He dropped his trash picker. The boy. Leo turned to look at the dog. The sun hit his face. Sterling stopped breathing. It was like looking in a mirror. The boy had his nose, his jawline, and those eyes ice blue. Cyrus had brown eyes. Silas had dark blue. Those ice blue eyes were Sterling's trademark. The girl Luna laughed. It was the same dimpled smile Sterling saw in his own baby photos. "They aren't from a donor," Sterling's mind screamed. The sterile thing. The medical report. It was a lie. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through him. She had tricked him. She had stolen his heirs. She had stolen his life. He didn't think. He didn't care about the consequences. He charged. "Cyrus!" Sterling screamed, his voice raw and gravelly. Cyrus flinched, turning her head. The security detail, discreetly positioned around the park perimeter, began to move, but Sterling was closer. He ran past the bench, straight for the kids. "Leo Luna," he shouted. "I'm your father. Look at me." The twins froze, looking at the strange, dirty man running toward them. Leo stepped in front of his sister instinctively. "Get back!" Cyrus screamed, leaping off the bench. Sterling fell to his knees in front of the children, reaching out with grimy hands. "It's me. I'm your dad. Look at my eyes, Leo. We have the same eyes." "She lied to you." Leo looked at the man, terrified. "Mommy!" he cried. Before Sterling could touch them, a shadow fell over him. Henry, the head of security, now older, but just as massive, grabbed Sterling by the back of his neon vest and hauled him up like a rag doll. "Let me go," Sterling thrashed. "Those are my kids. Look at them. They're mine." Cyrus rushed forward, pulling the twins behind her legs. Her heart was pounding, but not with fear, with fury. "Get him out of here, Henry," Cyrus commanded. Wait, Sterling yelled, his feet dangling off the ground. You lied, Cyrus. You told me I was sterile. You stole them. I'll sue you. I'll get a DNA test. The court will see the resemblance. Silas Vance stood up, slowly. He walked over to where Henry was holding the trashing man. Put him down. Henry, Silas said quietly. Henry dropped him. Sterling landed in the mud, gasping. He looked up at Silas with pure hatred. You old devil, Sterling spat. You orchestrated this, but you slipped up. Biology doesn't lie. I'll get a lawyer. I'll take half your fortune in child support. Silas chuckled. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed with age. Do you recognize this Sterling? Silas asked. Sterling squinted. What is that? It's the document you signed 4 years ago, Silas said, in exchange for me paying off your gambling debt to the Albanian mob so they wouldn't break your legs. Sterling's face went pale. He remembered. He had been desperate. He had signed something without reading it fully. It's a sworn affidavit, Silas read aloud, in which you, Sterling Thorne, acknowledge that you are not the biological father of Cyrus's children, that you have no claim to them, and that you waive all parental rights in perpetuity in exchange for financial settlement. You also signed a clause stating that any future claim of paternity would be considered an act of extortion. Silas dropped the paper onto Sterling's chest. You sold them, Sterling, Silas whispered. You sold them for $50,000 to cover a poker debt. It doesn't matter if you are the biological father. In the eyes of the law, you are a stranger who just admitted to extortion. Sterling stared at the paper. The memory washed over him. He had been so sure they weren't his. He had just wanted the money. No, Sterling whispered. I didn't know. I didn't know they were mine. Ignorance, Cyrus said, stepping forward, is not a defense. It's just who you are. She looked down at him. There was no love left, no hate, just pity. Leo Luna, Cyrus said softly. Come along. We're going to get ice cream. Who is that man, Mommy? Luna asked, pointing at Sterling. Cyrus paused. She looked at Sterling, who was weeping silently in the mud. Just a man who made a lot of mistakes, Cyrus said. Come on. They walked away. The bodyguard Henry gave Sterling one last warning look before following them. Sterling sat alone in the park. The wind picked up, blowing the yellowed contract across the grass, out of his reach. He watched them go. He watched his son, the future CEO of Vance Global, the boy who would have carried the name Thorne, take the hand of the old man who had destroyed him. Sterling closed his eyes. The image of Cyrus in the rain that night 5 years ago burned in his mind. He threw his wife out in front of guests, and in doing so he had thrown away the world. And that is the story of Sterling Thorne, a man who had a diamond in his hand and threw it away because he thought it was just a rock. It's a brutal reminder that arrogance is the most expensive trait a person can have. Sterling thought power came from money and status, but he learned too late that real power comes from loyalty, family, and the character you show when you think no one is watching. He lost his wife, his fortune, and his legacy, all because he couldn't see the value of the person standing right beside him. What do you think? Did Sterling deserve his fate, or was the punishment too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.